It was a frigid Monday morning in late January, the kind where the cold clings to your skin like a damp cloth. I'd just come back from St. Mary's Hospital, still in the same worn-out jeans I'd had on for 2 days, clutching the same duffel bag I'd thrown together when Mark collapsed. In my right hand, a bouquet of daisies and tulips, gifts from his co-workers, had wilted in my car's front seat overnight. My eyes were puffy, my lips chapped from endless tears and barely any sleep. I'd watched my husband die in the ICU just 10 hours ago. I wasn't ready for the emptiness of our house, but I was even less prepared for what I found. I stepped onto the porch and slipped my key into the front door. It wouldn't turn. I jiggled it, pulled it out, tried again. Nothing. My pulse quickened. I checked the spare key, tucked under a loose brick by the steps. No luck. It was as if the lock had turned its back on me. Then I noticed the curtains, my light blue cotton ones, the ones I'd sewn myself, were gone. In their place hung heavy, tacky brocade drapes with a loud paisley pattern I'd never seen before. My stomach churned. I leaned closer, peering through the slim gap between the fabric and the window frame, the morning light stinging my eyes. Inside, the living room was a mess of cardboard boxes stacked haphazardly where my tidy space used to be. A gaudy purple cushion sat on my favorite armchair. A mismatched mug rested on the coffee table. Then I saw her, Linda, my mother-in-law, in a gray sweater, her lips curled in a smile that made my skin crawl. She was sipping coffee, my coffee from the porcelain cups Mark and I had spent years saving for. Across from her, tossing throw pillows into a crate, was Emily, Mark's younger sister. They were chatting, giggling, moving in as if I didn't exist, as if Mark hadn't died the night before. I knocked. No response. I pounded harder, my hands shaking, my throat tight. After what felt like an eternity, the door inched open. Linda stood there, calm and collected, her arms crossed like she'd rehearsed this moment. "Sarah," she said, her head tilting slightly, "I didn't think you'd be back so soon." "What's happening?" My voice trembled. "Why won't my key work?" Linda leaned against the doorframe, unruffled. "Because, dear, this isn't your home anymore." My jaw dropped, words failing me. "What?" Her smile didn't falter. "Mark paid for this house, my son, not you. No prenup, no kids, and, let's be honest, no real contribution from you. It's time this house went back to his true family." The cold I felt wasn't just the January air, it was her. "I'm his wife," I said, barely above a whisper. "We bought this house together. I covered the mortgage when his startup tanked." Linda waved a hand, cutting me off. "Please, you played at being a wife while he worked. Now that he's gone, your time here is done." Emily appeared behind her, holding 2 of my ceramic platters. "You left the back door unlocked when you rushed to the hospital," she said with a smug grin. "Figured you wouldn't care." A hollow laugh escaped me, not from amusement but from the surreal shock of it all. "What's so funny?" Linda's eyes narrowed. I steadied myself, brushing away a tear I wasn't sure was from grief or rage. "You're rearranging cushions and sipping coffee in a house you think is yours." I said slowly, "You have no idea what you're messing with." Linda's smile wavered for a split second, just enough to give me an opening. I turned, walked back to my car, my useless keys jangling in my pocket. But I had something better now, something she didn't know about. By the time I was done, Linda would regret ever touching a single mug in my kitchen. 2 years ago, almost to the day, I sat on the steps of this same porch, watching Mark rub his temples in defeat. It was January then, too bitterly cold, the sky heavy with clouds. His tech startup had crashed the week before, the bank had locked his accounts, and his credit was in ruins. I could still hear the tremor in his voice when he said, "They might take the house, Sarah, Mark wasn't fragile, but that day, I saw him unravel in a way I'd never witnessed. This was the same house Linda now claimed belonged to her real family. The next morning, without telling Mark, I got up, drove to the local bank, and started the refinance process. I put the mortgage in my name, dipping into the modest savings I'd built from my graphic design days a decade earlier. I didn't tell anyone, not Mark, not my family, and definitely not Linda. She'd have spun it as proof of his failure as a provider. It took weeks, but I managed it. I took on freelance gigs to cover payments, fixed the leaky sink, stretched our grocery budget, repainted the living room. I kept our home alive through quiet determination. Mark never questioned where the mortgage statements went. He was too busy piecing himself back together. Linda, of course, had no idea. She only showed up for Christmas or Easter, always complaining that Charlotte was too muggy, too quaint, too backwater. I'd overhear her in the guest room, her voice sharp. "Mark, you were meant for better than this. All this pastel paint and street musicians." He'd give me that weary smile later, whispering in bed, "She doesn't get what makes us happy." I never wanted to fight her, not then, not even now. All I wanted was room to grieve, to sit in the home that still carried Mark's scent. Instead, she'd changed the lock's dot. I sat in my car outside the house for hours after that confrontation, the January chill seeping through my jacket. I didn't cry. My body seemed beyond it. How do you process losing your husband and your home in the same day? Eventually, I drove to a budget motel off Route 49, its air thick with bleach and something faintly sour. I used Mark's emergency credit card, the only one still active, and booked a room for 3 nights. Sitting on the lumpy mattress, I stared at my duffel bag. It held hospital forms, an unread novel, and the last voicemail Mark left me the night before his heart failed. I played it once, twice, then turned off my phone. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept seeing Linda in my armchair, Emily using my dishes, their boxes cluttering my hallway. They hadn't even waited for Mark's body to cool before claiming everything. By Tuesday morning, the sound of church bells from St. Peter's down the road woke me. They chimed every hour, steady and solemn. I sat up, ran a comb through my tangled hair, and stared at the cracked motel ceiling. My hands ached from gripping the sheets all night. Then I did something I never thought I would. I picked up my phone and called the funeral home. "Good morning, St. Luke's Memorial. This is Ellen," a soft voice answered. "Yes," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This is Sarah Bennett. I need to update the guest list for Mark Bennett's service." A pause. "Of course, Mrs. Bennett. What changes would you like?" "Remove Linda Bennett and Emily Bennett from the list." Another pause, longer this time. "Understood." I hung up before she could ask why. It wasn't revenge, not yet. It was a line in the sand, the first I'd drawn after years of biting my tongue. For the first time since Mark died, I felt a flicker of control. Tuesday afternoon, I went back to the house, avoiding the front door. I parked a block away, behind the tall shrubs that separated our backyard from the neighbors. Linda's car was gone, and there was no sign of Emily. The side door by the garage had a loose latch Mark had meant to fix it for months. I knew how to nudge it open silently. Inside, the house smelled wrong, like artificial vanilla air fresheners I'd always despised. My family photos were gone from the entryway, replaced by generic botanical prints. A pang hit me as I saw Mark's spot on the couch empty. No blanket, no trace of him. I didn't have time to linger. I moved quickly to Mark's study, a cramped room off the kitchen, filled with cables, notebooks, and the faint scent of his aftershave. Linda always called it a tech dump. I figured she wouldn't touch it. I was right. The room was exactly as Mark left it, organized chaos. Papers in neat piles, labeled USB drives, a sticky note about rescheduling a car service. I stood in the doorway, letting the familiarity wrap around me. Then I started searching. Top drawer, invoices from a side gig. Second drawer, old business cards, a flash drive, a note about a meeting. I wasn't sure what I was after, maybe just a piece of him. Then I found it, a thin navy folder tucked between two user manuals on his desk. Across the top, in Mark's precise handwriting, "Postnup, keep safe." My breath caught. We'd never done a prenup. We married in our 30s, 2 in love and 2 broke for formalities. Mark always said contracts killed the romance. But a postnup? I opened the folder carefully. Inside were 3 pages, legal letterhead, dated 2 weeks after our 2nd anniversary. I skimmed the text, my name, his name, signatures, terms. There, highlighted, in the event of the husband's passing, all jointly owned assets, including real estate, transfer fully to Sarah Bennett unless otherwise specified in a last will and testament. No will existed. This was ironclad. Tucked at the back was a single sheet of notebook paper, Mark's handwriting looser, more urgent. If you're reading this, something bad went down. If Mom tries anything, give this to your lawyer. You know how she is. Keep it safe, Sarah. M. My chest tightened. The curve of the S in my name, the way he signed just M, it was like a note from our dating days. I sank to the floor, reading it again and again. Grief, relief, and something like awe washed over me. Mark had known. He'd seen Linda's nature and tried to shield me. Even when he couldn't shield himself. I slipped the folder inside my coat and left through the side door, unnoticed. Back at the motel, I didn't sleep, but I didn't cry either. I pored over the postnup until the words were sharp in my mind. By morning, I'd called Jessica Harper, my college friend turned property lawyer, and set a meeting. I had the documents, and just enough fight to use them. Wednesday afternoon was dreary, the sky too tired to shine. I'd just come back from meeting Jessica, who hugged me like no years had passed and said, "We'll fix this." I was stirring a cup of instant noodles in the motel's tiny kitchen when I heard it. 3 sharp knocks, dripping with authority. Peeking through the curtain, I saw Linda, dressed in black like she was auditioning for a drama, and a man in a navy suit, square-shouldered, holding a clipboard, a wedding ring glinting. Lawyer. I didn't open the door. Instead, I stepped outside, zipping my coat, the folder tucked under my arm. We met in the parking lot, where the wind tugged at Linda's scarf. "Sarah," she said, her smile tight. "This is Mr. Carver, my family's attorney. We're here to discuss the house." "Discuss?" I echoed, my voice calm. Linda nodded, as if this were a polite business deal, not a takeover staged during my husband's funeral week. Since Mark left no will, his estate, including the house, is subject to division among next of kin. As his mother and sister, we have rights. I'm his wife, I said, his only legal spouse. Mr. Carver cleared his throat, visibly uneasy. What Mrs. Bennett means is that, absent a clear testamentary directive, probate law allows. I'm so glad you're both here. I cut in, my voice steady but sharp. This saves me a trip to your office. I held up the navy folder. Linda's smile flickered, a crack in her facade. This is a notarized postnuptial agreement, I said, signed 3 years ago, 2 witnesses, legal letterhead. It transfers all shared assets to me, the spouse, in the event of Mark's death. I let the words hang in the air. Mr. Carver reached out. May I see it? No, I said, pulling the folder back. You'll get a copy through my lawyer. I've already retained counsel. Linda's composure slipped, her eyes narrowing. You're lying, she hissed. Am I? I stepped toward the motel door. If I'm lying, you should feel confident enough to go back to your car and celebrate. But if I'm not, You've trespassed, entered unlawfully, and tampered with property that isn't yours. Mr. Carver edged away from her, distancing himself. Linda's voice dropped, laced with venom. You were never part of our family. You stole my son. I tilted my head. He wasn't a prize to be won. He was a man. I didn't steal him. You pushed him away when he stopped following your rules. I didn't wait for her response. I turned, walked inside and locked the door. Through the window, I watched them stand in silence for a moment before Linda stormed to her car, climbing into the passenger seat like a deposed monarch. Mr. Carver followed, looking uneasy. They didn't knock again. That night, I sat on the motel bed, rereading Mark's note, tracing the ink with my finger. Had he known how quickly she'd come for me, how brazen she'd be? Maybe he had. Maybe that's why he wrote it. Sleep didn't come. Adrenaline kept my hands restless, my breath uneven. But something had changed. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was planning. The next move was mine. By Friday morning, the motel room felt heavy with my grief, the air thick with stale coffee and unopened bills. I was at the rickety table, sorting through funeral details, music, speakers, seating when I noticed an envelope on the floor, slipped under the door overnight. No stamp, no return address. I stared at it for a long time before picking it up. Inside was a typed document from the Mecklenburg County Probate Court, the letterhead crisp, the ink fresh. My name stood out in bold. Sarah Bennett, respondent. My heart raced. To whom it may concern, this court has received a petition filed by Mrs. Linda Bennett, mother of the late Mark Bennett, challenging the validity of the property transfer and postnuptial agreement dated June 12, 3 years prior. The petitioner alleges undue influence, mental distress, and coercion may have impacted Mr. Bennett's decisions in the months prior to his death. I dropped the paper, my skin burning. She was claiming I'd manipulated him, controlled him while he was vulnerable, exploited the man I loved to steal his house. Rage simmered, slow and thick, not loud but unshakable. I grabbed my phone and called Jessica. I figured you'd call, she said before I could speak. She's saying I coerced him, I said, voice flat, that I forced him to sign the postnup. Jessica's tone was steady, unshaken. It's a weak move. When they don't have a legal leg to stand on, they throw dirt and hope it sticks. She wants to erase everything, I whispered. Not just the house. She wants to rewrite who he was, who we were. She wants control, Jessica corrected. This was never about money, Sarah. It's about her. I stared at the motel's peeling wallpaper, the cold wrapping around my legs. I want to fight her, not just stop her. I want to end this. Jessica paused, then her voice hardened, resolute. Good, but we do it smart. No contact, no responses. Let me build this case, piece by piece. We hung up. I folded the court letter, tucked it into my suitcase, and sat in silence. That afternoon, a text came from a number I hadn't seen in over a year. Tom Reynolds, Mark's old business partner. Hey Sarah, I don't want to get involved, but Linda called me, asked about Mark's mental state in his final months, if I had emails, medical records, anything about confusion or memory issues. I didn't say anything, but she mentioned that one investor meeting. Remember, he came back shaken. Just a heads up. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. I remembered that day, 3 months before Mark died. He'd come home pale, rattled, saying he forgot where he parked, couldn't recall the client's name. He chalked it up to stress, too many late nights, too much coffee. But Linda must have heard about it. She was building a case, trying to paint him as unstable. If she could convince the court he wasn't of sound mind, even with flimsy evidence, she could unravel the postnup. Undue influence was hard to disprove, especially with whispers and half-truths. Then, I remembered something Mark said one evening after dinner, almost in passing. "I've got a checkup at St. Luke's next week," he'd said. "Neurology, just to be safe." Probably nothing. I hadn't gone with him. He told me not to worry. I scrambled to my suitcase, dumping its contents across the bed bills, receipts, a birthday card, a grocery list. Then I found it, a sealed envelope from St. Luke's neurology clinic, buried in 3-month-old mail. My hands shook as I tore it open. "Dear Mr. Bennett, following your recent cognitive evaluation, we are pleased to confirm that your results are within normal range. No evidence of cognitive impairment was detected." I read it 3 times, my breath steadying. He was fine, and I had proof. Monday morning, 1 week since Mark's death, 5 days since Linda's petition, 72 hours since I found the neurologist's letter that changed everything. The courthouse on Tryon Street was cold, even in spring, with hard benches and marble floors that echoed every step and murmur. Jessica met me outside, her hair pulled back, folder in hand, eyes sharp. "Ready?" she asked softly. "I am," I said, and I meant it. For the first time in days, I felt solid. The courtroom wasn't crowded, just a few onlookers. Linda sat in the front row, dressed in somber black silk, her posture perfect, a tissue clutched like a stage prop. Emily sat beside her, head bowed, the picture of a grieving sister. Mr. Carver, the lawyer from the motel, was at their side. I didn't look at them. Jessica and I took our seats at the respondents' table, my hands steady beneath the surface, my spine straight. I wasn't here to plead. I was here to protect what Mark and I had built. The judge, a woman in her 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a weary expression, called the session to order. Mr. Carver spoke first, his tone measured, framing Linda as a worried mother, not a schemer. He mentioned Mark's sudden death, unanswered questions, and documents signed during times of emotional strain. He avoided saying coercion, but let the implication linger. Linda dabbed her eyes once. Perfectly timed. Jessica stood when it was our turn, her voice calm, no theatrics. She laid out the evidence like pieces on a chessboard. The notarized postnup, the house deed in my name, mortgage payments from my account. Then, the final move, the St. Luke's letter. She handed a copy to the judge. This, dated 3 months before Mr. Bennett's death, confirms his full mental capacity. Mr. Carver faltered, tried to recover. "Even so, Your Honor, we must consider the emotional context." "Do you have evidence?" the judge asked, her voice flat. "Medical records, testimony from a physician, anything showing diminished capacity." He hesitated. "No, Your Honor." "Then I see no basis," she said, already writing. "The postnuptial agreement is legally binding. The deed is in Mrs. Bennett's name." The gavel struck, sharp and final, echoing in my ears. "This house legally belongs to Mrs. Bennett. Case dismissed." I didn't cheer or smile. I just exhaled, a slow, quiet release, like untying a knot I hadn't known was there. Outside, the Charlotte sky was a clear, endless blue, birds singing in the maple trees as if nothing had happened. I didn't expect Linda to follow me, but her heels clicked on the courthouse steps, sharp like warning shots. "You may have the house," she said, her voice brittle, "but you'll never erase me. I'm his mother." I turned calm. "You erased yourself, Linda. The moment you tried to rewrite who Mark was, the moment you broke into our home, stole his things, lied in court. Mark knew you. That's why he wrote the postnup. That's why he left me the note." Her face faltered, just enough to show I'd hit the mark. I stepped closer. "If you come near me again, I won't need a judge to stop you. The restraining order's already filed." She recoiled. "You can't keep me from his funeral," she hissed. "I already did. I said evenly. I called the funeral home the day after you changed the locks. You're not on the list. Show up, and they'll escort you out. Her lips twisted. You spiteful. No, I cut in. I'm done. I walked away, shoulders back, not glancing back once. The chapel smelled of roses and polished wood. It was Tuesday, 1 week since Mark's heart stopped. The service was set for noon. But by 11:15, the pews were filling friends, neighbors, a few of Mark's old clients, some from Raleigh, others from Greenville. I'm so sorry, they murmured, hugging me. He loved you so much. He always talked about your backyard plans, how you were his anchor. I nodded, offered a faint smile, and swallowed words too heavy to speak. Jessica arrived just before 11:30, sitting near the front, not as my lawyer but as my friend. She didn't speak, she didn't need to. The musicians tuned their instruments softly, the pastor shuffled notes by the altar, and Mark's urn sat on a table, draped in navy cloth, his favorite color, chosen by me. Then I saw them, two figures slipping into the back pew, nearly invisible if you weren't looking. But I was. Linda and Emily, dressed in coordinated black, hair pinned, veils delicate but unmistakable. Mourning as performance. They weren't on the guest list, I'd ensured that. The funeral home promised they'd be stopped at the door, but someone must have missed them. Now they sat, pretending to belong. I froze, my pulse pounding, not with grief but with anger. I'd buried Mark once. I wouldn't let them use him for their charade. Jessica glanced at me. Want me to handle it? She whispered. I shook my head. No, this is mine. I walked down the aisle, my steps echoing in the hushed chapel. Every eye followed, the music stilled. The pastor stepped back, sensing the weight of the moment. At the back, Linda looked up, her smile faint. Emily's gaze darted away. You're not supposed to be here, I said, voice low but firm. We're not leaving, Linda replied, her tone defiant. I gave birth to him. Then you should have honored his wishes. My voice didn't waver. I'm his wife, the only one he chose. She straightened. You can't stop me from mourning my son. You're not mourning, I said. You're acting. She blinked, caught off guard. I'll walk out right now, I added. I'll take the pastor, the urn, everyone. We'll hold the service in a parking lot, my kitchen, but you won't sit here pretending you didn't try to erase him. You don't get to use his death to play the saint. For a moment, no one moved. Then Emily spoke, her voice soft, eyes down. Mom, let's go. Linda turned to her, stunned. We're not wanted, Emily said, standing. Let's stop pretending. Slowly, Linda rose. No scene, no shouting, just the quiet click of their heels as they left. The chapel door shut behind them. I walked back to the front. The music resumed, the pastor nodded, and I stood before Mark's urn. I said goodbye, not surrounded by deceit, but held by silence, truth, and the love of those who knew him. For the first time since he died, I felt peace. The day after the funeral, the house was quiet, not the kind that soothes, but the kind that waits, heavy and watchful. I stood at the kitchen sink in Mark's old hoodie, holding a cracked mug. The coffee was cold, untouched for an hour. Outside, the garden was bare, just soil and the promise of spring. I kept expecting Mark to appear at the table, humming off-key, feet propped up, but the chair was empty. The mug was his. The silence was mine. I'd survived the funeral, the court, but I was still braced for something to go wrong. So when I glanced out the front window and saw Linda's car parked across the street, I wasn't surprised. It was early, barely 7:00 a.m. engine off, windows half down, cigarette smoke curling out. She sat still, hands on the wheel, staring at the house. She didn't knock, didn't approach, just watched. I didn't move. I didn't call Jessica or take a photo for proof. I picked up my coffee, walked barefoot to the porch, and stood there, hair loose, mug in hand. Our eyes met. She flicked her cigarette out the window, started the car, and drove off. No words, no gestures, just gone. It wasn't surrender, but a retreat, her way of saying, "I'm still here." I went inside, locked the door, and exhaled. That night, I didn't sleep, not from fear, but from a quiet weight, like my body was still waiting for the next blow. For 3 days, she didn't return. I spent them cleaning, sorting Mark's files, touching every book, every pen he'd chewed on. Each item was a memory, a small wound. On the third afternoon, I found his gardening journal, filled with sketches, plans, dreams of a backyard where things could grow freely. He'd drawn zinnias, labeled each seed, taped a packet inside with a note. "For Sarah, when you're ready." I wasn't ready, but I went outside. I dug where he'd marked, turned the soil with my hands, planted every seed, watered them gently, and sat beside them as the sun set. For a moment, I forgot the court, the accusations, the funeral guest list. I remembered Mark's laugh, his ridiculous straw hat, his hands in the dirt. That night at the front door, I found an envelope, no stamp, no handwriting, just 6 words typed in bold. "This house will always be mine." I stared at it, then laughed, not with anger, but with release. Linda had nothing left, no claim, no proof, just words from a woman I'd already removed from my life. I took the paper to the garden, dug a hole under Mark's zinnia bed, and buried it deep. "Fertilizer," I muttered, thinking something good might grow from it. I brushed the dirt off my hands and whispered, "You don't own me anymore." I went inside and made tea with honey. Mark always said grief needed something sweet. Spring arrived early that year, the air rich with fresh soil and jasmine. The garden, once just dirt and Mark's scribbled dreams, began to stir. Tiny green shoots pushed through, stubborn and alive, reaching for the sun. Each morning I watched them, coffee in hand, wrapped in Mark's flannel shirt. No makeup, no expectations, just breathe. Linda never contacted me again, no letters, no calls, no car across the street. Maybe the restraining order worked, or maybe the truth finally sank in. I didn't care. She was a shadow fading in the distance. The house transformed with the seasons. Sarah painted the spare bedroom a muted olive green, removed the generic prints Linda had hung, and replaced them with framed memories. Photos of her and Mark by the river, their dog Bailey before he passed, and sunsets they'd chased instead of fights they'd sidestepped. She cleared out Mark's study, but left one drawer untouched, his drawer not as a monument, but as a quiet vow. Some nights, she sat by the window, speaking to him softly about the garden, the zinnias, how she was still standing. She didn't expect replies, but sometimes the breeze stirred just right, and the loneliness eased. Sarah returned to work, not out of necessity but by choice. She revived her graphic design business, starting small, one project at a time. A widow who wanted her dining room reimagined to feel less like her late husband's shadow. An older couple designing a greenhouse for ferns. A young woman, fresh from a broken engagement, craving an apartment that felt like her own. They didn't know Sarah's story, but she saw fragments of herself in their quiet reinventions. She designed with intention, with vision, with a steady strength she hadn't known she possessed. One Saturday morning, as she pruned the thyme by the kitchen window, Sarah found an envelope in the mailbox. No threats, just a check, a refund from the funeral home. A card inside read, "You carried yourself with dignity." Mark would have been proud. No signature, no return address, but Sarah recognized Emily's handwriting. She slipped the note into Mark's gardening journal. It didn't erase the past or mend the wounds, but it was something, a small gesture, and that was enough. By early summer, the zinnias bloomed in vibrant bursts of yellow and coral, so vivid they seemed to glow. Sarah sat beside them, barefoot, dirt smudged on her hands, sun warming her face. She whispered the final words she needed to say. "I didn't win because I took something from you, Linda. I won because I wouldn't let you take me." The wind rustled the leaves. The wind chimes on the porch hummed a soft, uneven tune, and for a moment, Sarah could almost hear Mark's laugh. People said grief faded with time. It didn't. It shifted, softened at the edges, wove itself into the rhythm of her days, into the coffee she brewed each morning, the pause between songs on the radio, the way her hand still reached for someone who wasn't there. Mark was gone, that was the truth. But so was the woman. Sarah used to be the one who kept quiet to avoid conflict, who let Linda's words drown her out, who sat through tense dinners with a forced smile, hiding her scars. That woman died the day Mark did. In her place, Sarah grew something new, not vengeance, not anger, but roots. The backyard garden flourished, not wild or unkempt, but alive. Zinnias, mint, thyme, lavender. She built a bench near the back fence, under the maple tree where Mark had wanted to hang chimes. Some evenings, she sat there, not to mourn, but to remember who she'd become. The sweetest victory wasn't the courtroom win. It was the soft click of her front door, locking from the inside. It was sipping coffee in her kitchen without dread. It was breathing deeply in a home that no longer carried shame. Sarah didn't share the full story often, but when someone asked a widow at church, a woman at the grocery store with trembling hands, she offered it in fragments. "You don't have to be polite to someone who tries to erase you," she'd say. "You're not selfish for locking your doors. You don't owe anyone your peace." Then she'd tell them about the garden, how it grew from a battleground, how it nourished her, steadied her, held her, how something small and beautiful could take root where she thought her world had ended. It wasn't poetry, it was survival. Months later, Sarah walked differently. She didn't apologize for existing, didn't justify the new locks, didn't flinch when she passed the street where Linda's car once idled, watching. Linda was gone. No more letters, no calls, no silent threats. She'd lost, and Sarah wasn't angry anymore. She was finished. The house was hers. The life was hers. The voice, calm, steady, unyielding, was hers. And she'd never surrender it again.